All right. Well, it's been a little bit of some time. Obviously, as everyone can see, we are in a nice new room. So this is part of the Innovation Hub at Seton Hall University. We originally were in a different building. This is one of the newest things that our actual university has put together. So this is going to be, for the time being, is going to essentially be where we will be hosting the Blue and the Beyond, right? So once again, here I am, Professor Anthony Riccio, obviously back, and obviously bringing Justin. Justin's back, as well as Joe. Some of you guys may remember Maddie. Maddie's going to be here just taking some pictures for the podcast, but like to welcome someone who was not here in the fall semester because he was out all over Europe. Obviously, that's the benefits of studying abroad. I'll allow you to introduce yourself and give your big introduction. So.
Thank you. My name's Sonder. I'm a mathematical finance and philosophy major. I'm a current junior, and I'm just really excited to be here. I've been a part of the PA program for about 2 years, and both years, Professor Riccio has been my success advisor that I've worked with. So I'm really excited to be here and contribute to a long-lasting tradition.
Yeah, and I mean, right. That's why we're here, right? Trying to get something that we think is going to be beneficial to a lot of students. And I think in general, I use that term loosely. I think so. I think because of the fact that we're more than just students, right? And so obviously coming into the second part of our year, right? The second semester, spring semester of 26, right? We, obviously I thought it was a successful semester for our show, for our university, and most importantly, I think for everyone involved, just in general, right? Outside of like being a student, right? And so I think now we're going to be pushing a new envelope, hopefully. That's the goal. And so I just kind of wanted to go around and kind of talk to you guys just briefly about, we've been talking from an angle, right, about being a Seton Hall student. I myself work for the university, right? So we've always talked about from the angle from Seton Hall, right? But I think we would be doing a disservice if we weren't acknowledging from the fact that we are people, right? We're people first before we're students, before we are instructors, before we are a part of this university, right? And so a lot of things we could shrink it down to the last, 2 months, right, have been going on in this world, right? And so, I think from talking from that angle, how have you been looking at the world recently, right? And taking into consideration of kind of what's on your mind with, academics and personal life, and then the fact that we're really not in control of everything else that is really happening around us at this time, right? And so obviously a lot of things have happened within the last 2 weeks, let alone the last couple months. And so I just wanted to kind of see, I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of students, a lot of people in general, feeling a little bit uneasy around, at this time, right? And so part of what we've all taught, right, is U-Life, right? In that transitional period, right? You come into college and you're trying to find out where you belong and what type of events you're going to face, whether it's making friends or adapting to a new environment or being by yourself for the first time, right? Some of us have been living here. Sonder is a perfect example. He's a California native, right? And so Sonder's really only been in California the last, I would say, maybe like 2 weeks, since July, maybe,
yeah,
right? You haven't even been back in the country for only about like 2 months, right?
Yeah.
So, right. And just this perspective and this change, and now putting in the fact that there's things going on, right? And let's be honest, there's a war going on right now, right? And so how has this been something that you guys have adjusted to or kind of looked at? How do you feel going forward?
Yeah, I can honestly start with that. I think the biggest thing is just staying optimistic, looking at different news sources that, brighten up your day, looking at things that, look at it from a different angle as well. Obviously, it's important to stay relevant, and it's our job as a student and as a citizen of the world to know what's going on. But even more important, it's good to keep ourselves optimistic, looking at news that excites us. I follow a lot of the marine conservation movements, so they'll post stuff about oh, how like the ocean is being restored by X percentage, or the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is decreasing in size. Like that's something that like excites me. And, like obviously, I stay up to date with all the other like depressing things, but that's just one way that I could mitigate that depressing atmosphere. Just
Yeah.
just so it's you feel like there's good in the world.
We might need a whole nother podcast just for what that is about, the marine conservation. And I think that's a great perspective, right? And being able to say, hey, like I'm going to try and look at the positive. Now, there is a flip side to that, right? Sometimes the negative is very much going to outweigh whatever's positive at that time, right? And there's a little bit of a kind of, am I being selfish at this point in time, right? Like, you're excited for, I don't know, today's the first day of NFL free agency, right? And some people who are fans of football are going to be watching and saying, oh, my team just signed someone, right? And how do you come into that realm and be like, am I being selfish thinking about something that is kind of trivial, right? But it brings me joy while, there's all these other crazy stuff happening in the world. Like how do you go about that?
I think one of the biggest things too is like as a college student, I think part of how to stay positive and kind of when there's all these different things going on is really like relying on the people around you. And a lot of times that can be, yes, doing things you're passionate in, but like doing it with people that also bring out like the best in you. And I think there's so many different experiences like I've had here at Seton Hall with like so many amazing people, and like it's like they make me better, and I think I benefited from them too. But I also feel that same capacity where I'm able to kind of give back and help them. And I think, sometimes we all have those things going on in our life. There's always the bigger things going on. But I think really when you have like a good support system around you and you can kind of rely on that and like help each other grow through those difficult moments, I think that's when you're really kind of setting yourself up, like kind of Saunders said, to be more optimistic, but also to kind of create an experience for yourself and kind of really grow through that.
Yeah, it really is what you make of it.
So essentially, right, trying to find things that obviously empower yourself and empower your environment, right? And so there's always a thing that I've always talked about is like making your piece of the world obviously the best place that it can be, right? So when people cross paths in that world, right, they're excited to be there, or they can at least see that the grass is green in some other parts, right? But do you think that we're being a little bit ignorant to what is going on around us?
You mean in the world? Like
In the
broader
world,
context
yeah,
of
right? So like you're thinking about from a perspective like, and it's the same reason when people have really trivial problems, right? Like some people might be complaining, oh, my car's not working, or this isn't, going well for me right now. And then that's where someone will always come in and maybe they'll be like, hey, well, at least you don't have this ailment or this terminal problem, right? And so I try to look at things from that perspective, and I try to see how, especially in this day and age, right? Because I grew up during the beginning of the Iraq War, not the one in nine. Well, I did grow up in the one in the Persian Gulf, the first one. But when I was like in sixth grade, right, that was the first time when they had the Iraq War, and that was a very big deal as well. Now I was a little bit younger than at your age, so obviously when I was in college, it was at that point it had been like 8 years. I think the Iraq War stopped in like 2011, so it's probably like my second or third year in college. But from that perspective, now this is kind of little new for you guys. So it's like being able to handle this whole political climate in this environment, specifically relate to like what's going on in this world. And then like, well, at the same time, I'm worried about FGA or, trying to do things that like, I guess in this little world. And that's what's kind of crazy about college is like you're in, especially if you live here, this is its own little universe, but like, how do you stay on top of it where you're trying to honor all these things? Or is it better to just be like, I'm just going to worry about myself? And that I know that sometimes can be like we talked about it, or it could be a little selfish, but sometimes that's kind of how things kind of see it through essentially.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a line between like being ignorant about it, because I think it's really important to like stay aware of those issues that are going on, and then by being aware of it, I think if you truly are, passionate about like making the world a better place, you then can take those struggles that other people are going through, or like those hardships or those burdens, and then apply that and take that respect to like the people around you. I think by the opportunities, like sees the opportunities you have to like make a difference, right? Like if I feel like from my lens, if I spend my time here as, you know, a 21-year-old in United States, student at Seton Hall, like however, if I spend my time worrying about things that are going on in like another continent and trying to like make that better, I might end up hurting by, you know, not being the best I can do, like to help people here. So because I like just can't be as effective in like if I'm not in that part of the world. So like I think being aware of it's really important because then you can apply that respect to other people around you and respect to like your passions about helping the world in your place. But I think you should definitely be aware of it just to be educated on what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think Justin's a perfect example. He spent his last, his spring break this past week in Tacoma, Washington, helping people rebuild and build houses.
Oh yeah,
And
for Habitat for Humanity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of, using what's within your power to make a positive change in the world. And that's a perfect example of what everyone should be doing, to a certain extent, right? Maybe if you don't have the time, for an entire week, you could, work at a soup kitchen or something like that. But I think what it comes down to is really gratitude, kind of what Justin was getting at. Really just acknowledging what you have and what, what you could have and the environment around you, and understanding that a lot of people don't have this privilege that we have to live in this, great place, to be in this bubble, like you said. And I think a big part of, growing and like helping the world is acknowledging that bubble and then moving out of the bubble to help people.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
You definitely touch upon something that obviously is, I think it's for the most part, right? It's almost like the consolation, all right, and trying to make good with a situation that we really don't have a huge hand in terms of like being able to control it, right? And your response is obviously the most important thing, right? Because that's the one thing that we can actually control is how we respond to things. Now, have you guys, and obviously being PAs, have you, and just to start it off, what a peer advisor is someone who is assigned to a cohort of freshman students that attend school from obviously for their first year, right? So it's their responsibility as to help transition them during their college year, right? So you guys are peer advisors, and obviously I was more so speaking from if people have just popped into this to listen to it for the first time. But have you guys had students or your students reach out to you and discuss and talk about what's going on in the world? Or does it seem to just be something that you guys haven't had to converse with your students?
I definitely have multiple times, and it's been a point of, struggle for a lot of my students. They kind of reach out and say like, hey, like I'm really struggling with this. Like maybe they have family and where the conflict is happening, or, they know somebody like related to the conflict, and that's really, a big burden on them. So I kind of just tell them, similar to what I was talking about earlier, like just find like a positive silver lining somewhere there, whether it be in like specifically in the situation or in something else that, brings you joy. And then obviously like understanding what's going on, but not letting it consume you. And then doing what you can to help. I think there is a barrier of like, I can contribute in some way, right? Whether I'm like, sending $5 to a nonprofit in Ukraine, whatever it is, right? Doing that, or, if you want to use your right to protest, however you want to express yourself to like help the situation, how you see it, is the way that you should be going forward.
Yeah, I mean, once again, right, there's going to be times in life, right, where you're going to come across things and you say, there's really only so much that I can do, right? So how do you do the most with as little as that is provided in that situation, right? And so, I think it's a good conversation to have because we live in a much different world than we did 5 years ago, right? 5 years ago, I'm pretty sure it was COVID, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, so even then was so much different than it is now. And now understanding that we have to live in this world where we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after that and so on and so forth, right? And so I think some of the big things come into how do you live in the moment, right? Even when it's a little chaotic around you.
Yeah,
So-
and I think that's like actually a really good point. I think that's something that I had to work on a lot of, like living in the moment. because obviously when you come to college and you're super involved and you want to make an impact on people, that usually comes with a lot of different things. And you might be worried about, oh, well, I have this, I have that. There's these external things going on around me. But I think when you really learn to appreciate the moment and appreciate the beauty of like what you have, and really like Saunders said, have that gratitude for what you have and really appreciate that moment, it really is special, and it makes you really kind of hone in on like what you have, and you want to take those positives then, and you kind of also want to share them with other people. I think sometimes like we have so many blessings here, and I feel like sometimes when we're kind of like going through a day and we're kind of just running through it, it can be easy to take them for granted. But when you really like sit down and you think about like what you have and you really appreciate those tiny little moments. I even think about like we were talking about spreading positivity. Even it could even be like a simple hi, how are you? You don't know what you may not even know that person or what they're going through, but maybe that little small glimmer of hope that you give them, that translates into positivity that they now bring to someone else, and then therefore you're kind of a byproduct of that positivity spreading. So I think kind of like just being appreciative of like what you have and appreciating that moment, but also like using those moments and using those experiences and kind of sharing those with other people as well.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And like I said, being able to bring a little good in the world when the world in itself is, you can give it a choice word if you'd like, but just understanding that, like, trying to find positivity as much as possible, right? And it can be cliche, right? And everyone's, he's so peppy about everything and all that, but like things can be a lot worse, right? And so understanding that if you can spread a little bit of positivity, in some of the worst situations possible, right? You have no idea what type of impact you're going to give to others at that time. So I think for now we're going to take a little quick break, and then we will be right back. We're back. I think this is this room is definitely going to be very, very helpful in terms of how we utilize going to segments and all that. So I definitely think this is gonna be good. This is gonna be very good. But funny enough, obviously during our little break, so obviously we were talking about positivity, all right? And so obviously most of the time positivity is traditionally a response to bleak, negative situations, right? And for the most part, we've probably been around positive people who might be just traditionally positive in general, but a lot of times the response is, this is not how I envisioned it. I want to go forward with it. And it's funny because, I knew you were from California, Sounder, right? Because we've talked about that before, but I did not know how impacted you were by the fact of the California wildfires. And so once again, a certain specific situation for most of us, right? You're from North Jersey. I'm originally from Connecticut, but now living in Jersey. We don't really have too many fires, that can literally take over miles and miles of land in this part. But, obviously talking to Brake, you're a pretty positive person. So, I just kind of wanted to kind of highlight, especially what's going on in the world, right? That was a big issue. Was it last summer that stuff was happening? I mean, it seems like to happen every year.
Every 6 months, it feels like.
Yeah, every 6 months. Yeah. And people thought, you hear about the smog in LA and all that. And then on the top of the fact that forests are just incinerating, right? Yeah. But kind of, that's a whole different situation to kind of deal with. We can sit here and talk about the blizzard, right? That we just recently had, but that is some like real stuff. Talk about that.
Yeah. So I remember it was my sophomore year of college. So
last year essentially.
I just came back to campus. So I felt a sense of guilt being away from my family and seeing them take these photos. I'm not sure if the camera can pick these up, but this is like from my parents' balcony, and there's like the flames are like visible.
Oh wow!
In the picture. So it's pretty, like, it looks like a sunset, I guess, from far away, but that's all like fire,
like a terrifying sunset.
Yeah, and it just felt so surreal. Like, my little sister had her school canceled because of it. There was ash falling into, like, she swims, and there was ash falling into the pool. Like, there were different situations like that. And I never felt so guilty before because I moved away, right? It was a big struggle my freshman year because I didn't really know anybody on the East Coast. I'd never been to the East Coast before I made that big leap. And I felt a little bit of guilt for that. And then now even more that I can't be there when my family is like, really, terrified of this event that's going on. I had 5 to 10 friends that lost their homes and, had to relocate to a different one. Maybe they were, the state funded some mobile homes. People were living in RVs for a little bit just so that they can get their, feedback on the ground and stuff. But it was a really surreal experience. And, going back to that positivity note, I found that silver lining by finding other people in the Northeast from my area that also were going through that. And we were able to talk about it and like, think about positive ways to look at it and different perspectives. It was difficult for sure, but it's something that, I pride myself on my positivity and my resilience to be able to like navigate that kind of issue.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably being very judicial on how difficult it was, right? It was probably like that's, it's funny. Me and Joe had a student last year, and obviously, who dealt with something, their home burned down, and it really affected them throughout their whole semester, and it was something we didn't know about until like literally the end of the semester, right? And so I can only imagine, right? I mean, I've been blessed not to have something of that major consequence happen, because obviously not being without a home is kind of, it's not, it's something that we talk about the things that you need as a person, right? You need food, you need shelter, right? You need water. So like understanding like in that perspective, especially you leaving, to come to the Northeast while your family was out there, I could just, just to kind of think about what was going on in your mind. Like you have to remain positive in a way, but obviously the guilty aspect is so impactful and so powerful on you. I'm kind of lost for words to really talk about it, but if you can expand a little bit into that, like
I think it also goes into like a larger theme of just you never know what's going on with someone, right? Like that's why you always have to have empathy for people. I remember like Justin and Joe were like kind of like wondering why I was like so off that week, and the reality was like I would call my parents at night, right? It's a 3-hour time change. Call them like 6 p.m. It's 3 p.m. there, and they're explaining to me like that they see the open flames. Like that was a big deal for me, and I didn't necessarily tell a lot of people because it was something that was a big burden, and I didn't really want to talk about it a lot because I want to think about other things, right? And so I remember like they asked me, and like I kind of explained to them the situation, but it's just a larger theme of you just never know what someone's going through, right? And it speaks to what it means to be empathetic, specifically within a college atmosphere as a young adult. Like you have to just be empathetic to everyone that you meet and be able to like see through what they might be going through and what you don't know about for sure.
Yeah, I mean, really thinking about that now with what's going on in the world currently, right? And we've obviously have a very diverse student population that obviously what's going on is affecting more than just one group of people, and so it's funny, Sandra, how you talk about not knowing what other people are going through, right? So practicing the fact that we have to be mindful of that. And quick story, it was probably last year, and I remember I was sitting in a cafe, this cafeteria specifically, and I had this massive realization that you truly have no idea what people are going through. I'd seen one of my students eating lunch, and most of the time, right, you kind of will look over that. Justin's eating a sandwich. Cool, right? But then I thought about it for a second. I'm like, the thoughts that I've had eating lunch by myself have been some of the more, impactful times of my life, or possibly the lowest times of my life, or the most emotional times of my life, whether it was high or low, right? And then I thought about it for a second. I'm like, how do I not know, that may be something that they're going through at this time, right? And so I then made a specific attempt at walking up to my student and just addressing them, in the very simplest of providing a greeting, right? Hey, how are you doing today? How's everything doing? In terms of just asking about school and family and all that. And I came away from that feeling like you have no idea how someone is and what they're going through, and that a little bit of just asking someone how they're doing or just acknowledgement. I think acknowledgement is more important, right? Some people will be like, well, because most of the people aren't going to be tremendously honest with you at first, right? Especially if you don't have that relationship. But being able to acknowledge someone's existence in a time where they're going through something, right? And like I said, I have no idea if they were or not, but when I had that sort of epiphany, I was like, you have no idea how impactful that can be on someone. And then I'll lead into a second story. So I was substituting teaching. So I've done a ton of things in my life. I've been a jack of all trades for the most part, but in terms of education, I've been doing that for obviously the last, 5 or 6 years, maybe 7. I can't even count anymore. So, but I was substituting for a 8th grade class. All right. And so during this 8th grade class, it was like almost like a study hall period, right? It was like an academic period. And everyone knows that most substitutes really don't care what's going on, right? They just want to make it through the end of the day. And I'm not going to shy away from the fact that maybe I didn't really have my full, motivation to go out there and be the best substitute I could that day. I was probably just trying to get through the day and be like, you know what? I just want to go home, right? But what happened was a 7th grade student was presenting, right? And so she was presenting on some sort of like charity where it was like acknowledgement of like people who have struggles and all that, and talk about feelings and processing and real interesting stuff for a 7th grader to be talking about, right? And so we've all been in middle school, right? And I can be the first one to say that middle school is probably the toughest time, right? I mean, everyone's trying to figure out who they are, and that's where, kids can be a little nasty, right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
To a degree, right? And so what ended up happening was this student was trying to present, and no one was listening to her. No one was listening to the student whatsoever. And this student she was yay high. I mean, she was she looked like she was like in 5th grade. And so she's trying to speak out loud and she's trying to talk, and no one's paying attention, and they're being kind of rude. And then, as a substitute teacher, I wasn't thinking about this at the time, but when I saw kids being rude, obviously that kind of like struck a nerve in me. But that's not what I realized what was important about trying to address this situation. What I realized at that time was you have no idea what someone's going through, and then you have no idea that if you don't acknowledge or give them some sort of ability to handle the situation, whether that's just sitting in it within the presence, right? Maybe I don't know what you're going through right now, but I'm going to talk to you, and maybe for that period of time, you feel a little bit of strength, right? And I told myself, I realized at that moment, I was like, if I handle this situation completely different right now, I can have a very big impact one of 2 ways, right? If I handle it poorly, this impact could really create like a core memory for someone, and they'll be like, I don't like speaking in front of people. I don't like putting myself out there because I had a really terrible experience. Or it could have been I do something in a positive light, right? And then that person comes away from it being, I am not afraid to do A, B, and C because of this situation happened before. And I know that someone will always be there, or something will always turn positive, right? And so, funny enough, this just came on the whim, and I just stopped the class right there. I had a huge dissertation on why we need to pay attention. And then then the student came back and presented, and everyone paid attention, and they participated. And I saw the student smile, right? And so, and I'm not trying to sit here and be like, oh, yay me for doing this, but you don't realize how, like, the littlest memories, right? And we probably have all memories, right, of things that happened to us when we were younger, where, right, if someone had just approached the situation properly, we wouldn't have had reservations about things going forward, right? And I can sit here and tell a bunch of stories for hours and hours and hours and be like, oh, that's why that happened, and that's why all that happened. But, I think realizing, why we're talking about positivity is like understanding the ability to really have that impact without even like, providing your arm or leg on it, right? Like having that impact, can change others' trajectories for good. And I think that's something that, if we can preach and we can go forward with, I think there's going to be, I think it just comes back to that whole thing, making our part of the world like nice, right? Making it as good as possible. So
Yeah. And I think within that too, you can also kind of find, kind of how you were saying, like trying to find your own identity. Like I think another problem too that we fall into is we hear like, oh, this person's this or this person's that. And I think all of us here want to provide that empathy, but like it kind of goes back to that kind of whole thing of like, don't judge a book by its cover. And I feel like a lot of times in society, we just kind of look at things at face value to kind of get by, right? But really, when you take that extra time, that extra step to kind of open that book and kind of learn more about a person, that's where you're really going to get to know them. And like, I kind of have a similar experience where I kind of found out something about myself, but also like about like someone else. So like, kind of that whole middle school thing, kind of finding your identity and stuff. But there was always like this one girl in our grade, and she was like a nice girl, everything, but just you could tell like something was kind of probably going on. And I was kind of part of a friend group at the time that kind of was consistently like making fun of her, and I kind of knew it wasn't the right thing, but I just felt like at that time I didn't have like a voice to say it. Like I didn't have a voice to stand up and say like, no, like that's not right. And then finally like one day it kind of just hit me, and I was like, I shouldn't be associating myself with these people if they're going to treat people that way. So I stood up and like I said something to them, and it's like kind of middle school is that kind of time where you play at recess, but people are just kind of talking. So I kind of went over to her and I kind of just talked to her and I kind of played with her, and I'll never forget at the end of the day, like the smile that brought to her face. And that was something that kind of always resonated with me. And then, we both went to aftercare because like our parents worked late and stuff. And I remember like overhearing one day that when her dad came to pick her up, that her mom was unfortunately dying of cancer. And it's just like those little things you don't realize, but you're able to make an impact. And like still to this day, that helped me in two ways. One, it's the simplest little things sometimes that can bring positivity and kind of change someone's perspective on life. And two, it kind of helped me find kind of my own identity and realize like I need to start surrounding myself with better people. And it's not always about sometimes receiving the accolades and doing these things, or, they'll give you like a gold star, stuff like that. But really, how can I be a resource for someone to be happy and to bring them genuine fulfillment?
Yeah.
I mean, did you want to go?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I didn't even know that story, Joe. That's awesome. And like what you were saying really resonated with me about how sometimes we're in these situations where, like in a crossroad, do I act this way? Do I act this way? And that could really change like someone's whole experience. Honestly, most recently for me, like Sandra mentioned, I was just on that service trip in Tacoma, and we were with like a new group, and like I'm a junior, there were like freshmen in that group and stuff, and it was overall a great experience, like really great group. But there were some people that were like kind of more shy and like kept to themselves, and like freshman is my second trip, so I really just kind of took that initiative like intentionally to just ask them like how they're doing, like on site, smile at them, like talk to them, and it was a group of 18 of us. And there was just a few people that like I really didn't want to feel excluded, and I like intentionally would like ask them how they were doing, like those type of things, just small. And at the end of the trip, we do like letters to everyone. Like everyone writes a letter to that person, and these were not like the few people I'm talking about were not the people I'm like closest with at all. But their letters to me like meant the most to me because they talked about how like I always managed to like talk to them like right at the right moment, like right when they needed it, or like included them in the conversation right when they needed it. And like that really just meant so much to me because I intentionally did it. Like it wasn't something like that coincidentally, like I like purposely like tried to do that and like noticed that. So I was just proud that like it became true that, that what I did like made an impact on them, and then overall probably made their experience way better. It could have like trickled down to them having a better day and building up the courage to try using the saw or whatever it is. Like, so I was just really like happy, a recent experience that you talked about, like the experience you talked about, it made me think of that just because it was very recent for me.
Absolutely. Intentionality. Did I say that rightly? Did I say that right after I said rightly wrong? Intentionality. I don't know. Having intention is so important. And back to what Joe was saying, like it's so easy to be negative. Like it's so easy to complain and complain and complain and complain and be negative. And in this aspect, this group of people, in order to get joy out of their day, were being negative to someone. Like, that's like, think about how much sense that doesn't make, right? In order for me to be positive about something or to get positive joy out of my life, I have to be negative. Like, it doesn't add up, right? And so understanding that, like, to have the intention of just being good to others, doing the right thing, like, it goes so far, right? And there can be, sometimes, right, there's a selfish thing in it, and it's probably the best selfish thing you can, right? Having that intention to help someone out so you can feel good is a lot better than treating someone with absolute cruelty, right? And so, like, I'd rather have that on a daily basis of, I'm going to make this person feel good, because if I see them smile, it's going to make me feel good. Okay, that you want to be selfish in that aspect, be selfish as much as you want,
It's
right?
like the Friends episode that there's never a selfless, like, you can never have a selfless good deed, because it always makes you like feel good.
100%. And it's like going back to, like, trying to make things positive in the worst situations, right? And, like, going back to Sonder, right? Where you are from is absolutely literally and figuratively on fire, right? It's literally burning down, right? And how do you have that positivity? And, like, as someone who wants to remain strong, right? We don't want to let people see, like, hey, this is affecting me, right? And so understanding that, you probably would have felt a little differently if someone came up to you during that time and was like, what's wrong? Like, or how are you doing, right? Did anyone, and this isn't to put you guys on blast, but did anyone come up to you and was like, how are you doing?
Specifically them, actually. Funny though. They noticed that something was wrong and, like, that I was acting differently. And they asked me about it, and I kind of opened up a little bit. They had to pry a little bit because I was, like, not willing to share it, like, openly. But, I was happy that they did, because, like you were saying, it's good to open up and allow others to, feel the same thing that you're feeling, so that they can get on your level and rationalize with you and make you feel better.
Yeah, and life's sometimes, right? And and like we said in the first part of the show, the most important thing, the one thing you can control, right? And so I'm a big person of, I don't believe in the like the poor hand you've been dealt, and like, I get that. And so I don't want people to think that I'm being inconsiderate, but you control so much with how you respond, right? And, like, how you respond and how, what your actions are from that point going forward. Like, that is such a huge portion of who you are and what you will end up accomplishing, right? And, if you can do that on that flip side, right, and be positive and use your intention for good, right, you're going to produce a lot more and get, the fulfillment and the satisfaction of life through those means than you will be if, like, I'm going to make fun of a 5-year-old, to make myself feel good right there. And then and I guarantee you that friend group probably reflected on it and was like, probably shouldn't have done that. Middle school is middle school, right? We're trying to figure ourselves out, and sometimes that's what happens. So, I definitely, all your stories, guys, they mean something to me, because I think having that ability to, like, look at it and be like, oh, we've all experienced something. And, a very smart man who actually works for this university said, do the right thing, right? Do the right thing. And so understanding how important it is to do the right thing, no matter what. And whether that is, reaching out to someone when you can, right? It doesn't take too much, right, to spread a little positivity in a world that we don't know what tomorrow will bring, right? And so understanding that there is such an impression that we can bring to others by making our piece of our world a little green. I think this is probably a pretty green room right now, right? I mean, I would say there's a lot of positivity in this, maybe too much positivity, right? So, anything else before we sign off?
No, I think you kind of summed it up great about just, like, having the right intentions, being willing to make that positive impact on others, even when it's not easy. And then hopefully ultimately leading to, like, a trickle effect where that positivity you bring to someone, like, let's say I share that positivity with Sonder, he now shares it with Justin, and Justin shares it with Professor Riccio, and we kind of just continue, like, making the world a more positive place. Because, like you said, it's easy to be negative, but it's those more challenging moments where if you're positive, it can completely change your whole outlook on life and set you up for future success and just being a better person in the world.
Yeah. There's a good movie called Pay It Forward. I don't know have you guys ever seen Pay It Forward with with it based on that logic. The main character passes away though, but once again though, it's a pretty good film. So I was just trying to get a little laugh there, but you guys didn't laugh. So. All right. So on that note, once again, it was great for us to be back here, right? Welcoming Sonder to the show and
Yes,
for
sir.
good. You know, so if there's anything that I can say to anyone listening is to be positive, remain positive, right? And as cliche as it sounds, right, the sun will always come out at some point, right? And so being positive and this too shall pass. So doing what you can to make someone's life better, right, and trying to change your perspective so that you can be the light in someone's day. All right. And on that note, guys, that will be it for our first episode back for this semester, and we will see you guys again.